Alara Sinclair had not eaten in 2 days, and the rain had finally stopped pretending to be gentle. She sat beneath the awning of a flower shop on Madison Avenue, her knees drawn up, her fingers wrapped around a paper coffee cup someone had left on the bench 3 hours ago. It was empty, but holding it made her feel less invisible. People walked past in evening clothes, their heels clicking against wet pavement, their laughter arriving in small, bright waves that never quite reached her. Across the street, the Beaumont Grand Hotel blazed with light. Gold letters on the marquee read, "The Holt Foundation Annual Charity Gala, by invitation only." Black cars lined the curb. Valets in white gloves opened doors for women who stepped out as if the sidewalk had been laid specifically for them. Alara watched them the way a person watches snow from inside a cold room, close enough to see, too far to feel warm. She had not always been here. There had been a time, years ago, when she had known the weight of a good wool coat and the smell of fresh flowers on a kitchen table. But that life had ended in smoke and paperwork and a long series of doors that closed one after another until there were no more doors left to try. She was 32 years old, and most days she felt 70. 3 blocks north, Ronan Ashford sat in the back seat of a black Mercedes, staring at the gala entrance through tinted glass. His driver had parked 5 minutes ago. Ronan had not moved. He adjusted the collar of his charcoal suit, ran one hand across his jaw, checked his phone, then put it away without reading anything. These were the small rituals of a man preparing himself to walk into a room full of people who had once celebrated his downfall. 8 months earlier, Ronan had been the youngest self-made billionaire in the tech sector. His company, Ashford Systems, had been valued at $6 billion on a Tuesday. By Friday, it was worth nothing. A coordinated short attack, leaked documents, fabricated lawsuits. His own board voted to remove him, his investors vanished overnight, and the woman he had been engaged to for 2 years, Vanessa Holt, had returned his ring with a note that read, "I will not anchor myself to a sinking ship." She had not even said it to his face. The note was typed, printed on her personal stationery, as if ending a relationship was the same as declining a dinner invitation. Ronan had kept the note, not because he missed her, but because pain, when properly remembered, could be useful. He had rebuilt everything. Quietly, ruthlessly, his new venture had surpassed the old one in half the time. And the same people who had written his obituary were now writing profiles about his comeback. But the scar tissue from Vanessa's betrayal was still there, just beneath the surface. And tonight, he intended to make sure she saw what she had discarded. The gala was her event. The Holt Foundation was her family's vanity project. A charity that raised money mostly for the purpose of being seen raising money. She had invited him, which surprised him. He suspected she wanted to parade her new life in front of him. She was now with Kieran Drake, a man who had once been Ronan's closest ally in the industry, before quietly feeding information to the people trying to destroy him. Vanessa and Kieran, the betrayal had been symmetrical. One took his heart. The other took his company. And now they stood together at galas, smiling for cameras, pretending they had earned what they stole. Ronan opened the car door and stepped out into the damp evening air. He walked toward the hotel entrance with the kind of calm that unsettled people because it could not be read. Reporters recognized him immediately. Cameras flashed. "Ronan, any comment on attending your ex-fiancée's gala?" "Mr. Ashford, is it true you've tripled your net worth since the collapse?" He said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence, delivered correctly, said more than any quote ever could. Then he saw her. She was sitting just outside the glow of the hotel lights, close enough to hear the music from the lobby, but far enough that the doorman would not bother with her yet. Her dark hair was damp. Her jacket was too thin for the weather. She held the empty paper cup with both hands, and her posture, straight back, chin level, struck him as something that did not belong to someone the world had clearly abandoned. A security guard was already approaching her. "Ma'am, you need to move. This is a private event." Alara looked up. Her face was pale, her lips slightly cracked, but her eyes were steady. "I'm not blocking anything. You're making guests uncomfortable. Please leave." Ronan was already crossing the street before he made the conscious decision to do so. "She's fine where she is." The guard turned, recognized Ronan, and immediately recalibrated. "Mr. Ashford, I heard what you were doing." The guard has stepped back without another word. Alara looked up at Ronan. She studied him the way someone studies a locked door, trying to decide whether what was behind it was worth the risk. Up close, Ronan noticed the exhaustion carved into her face, the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly around the cup, and beside her left eyebrow, a thin crescent-shaped scar, pale and almost silver, the kind of mark that only becomes visible when you are close enough to really look. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine." She was not fine. They both knew it. "When did you last eat?" She hesitated. "It doesn't matter." Ronan crouched down, so they were at the same level. It was a small gesture, but Alara noticed it. Most people who spoke to her either looked down or looked away. This man did neither. "What's your name?" "Alara." He repeated it quietly, as if the name deserved more space than the sidewalk could offer. "Come inside with me," he said. She almost laughed. "Excuse me?" "The Gala. Come with me. You're out of your mind." "Possibly, but the food is excellent. And you haven't eaten." She looked down at herself, the thin jacket, the worn shoes, the coffee cup she was still holding for no reason at all. "I can't walk in there looking like this." Ronan stood and looked at the glowing entrance, where women in beaded gowns were floating through the doors like creatures from another species. Then he looked back at Alara. "You look like someone who has survived things that would have destroyed most of the people in that room." The words landed somewhere deep inside her. She wanted to brush them off, but they had already settled. Ronan removed his suit jacket and placed it over her shoulders. It was warm and heavy and smelled faintly of cedar. Alara touched the lapel without thinking, her fingers tracing the fabric slowly, as if she was trying to remember the last time someone had offered her anything without wanting something in return. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because that room is full of people pretending to care about charity while stepping over actual human beings on the sidewalk." It was not a tender answer, but it was honest, and Alara had not heard honest in a long time. She set the empty cup on the bench, stood up slowly, and took his arm. "Please, if you are enjoying this story, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Dark Secrets Live. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this one." Now, back to the story. The lobby of the Beaumont Grand smelled like gardenias and old money. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across marble floors. A string quartet played something soft and expensive in the corner. Every surface gleamed with the kind of beauty that existed specifically to remind you of what you could not afford. When Ronan walked in with Alara on his arm, the room did not go silent all at once. It happened in waves. First the people nearest the door, then the ones at the bar, then the clusters near the auction tables. One by one, conversations died as heads turned toward the entrance. They were not looking at Ronan. They were looking at Alara. She was still in her street clothes beneath his oversized jacket. Her hair was damp and unstyled. Her shoes were scuffed, and the opulence of the room made her poverty impossible to ignore. But she did not shrink. She stood beside Ronan with her shoulders back and her chin level, holding his arm as though she was afraid, but had decided that fire was not a good enough reason to become small. From across the ballroom, Vanessa Holt watched them enter. Vanessa stood near the stage in a silver column dress that caught the light like mercury. Her blonde hair was swept into a low chignon, and her smile, the one she used at events like a weapon, faltered for exactly 2 seconds when she saw Ronan. Then she saw Alara, and the smile disappeared entirely. Kieran Drake stood beside her, one hand on the small of her back. He leaned in and whispered something, but Vanessa did not respond. Her eyes were locked on Ronan and the woman beside him. Ronan guided Alara through the room. Whispers trailed behind them like smoke. "Who is she? Did he bring someone off the street?" "This is a $10,000 a plate event." Alara heard every word. Her grip tightened on Ronan's arm. He bent his head slightly and said, "Don't fold. They're staring. They always stare. That's the only thing most of them are good at." She exhaled, but she kept her head up. Ronan led her to a table near the front and pulled out her chair as if she were the most important person in the room. She sat. Her hands were shaking, but she placed them flat on the table and steadied them through will alone. A waiter approached and filled her water glass. She drank it in 3 long swallows. Ronan watched her without comment, then quietly asked the waiter to bring bread, soup, and whatever the kitchen could prepare quickly. When the food arrived, Alara ate slowly, not because she wanted to appear polite, but because her stomach had forgotten how to handle abundance. Ronan did not rush her. He simply sat beside her and kept the rest of the room at a comfortable distance. Vanessa arrived at their table 11 minutes later. Ronan had been counting. Ronan. Her voice was smooth and practiced. What a surprise. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. You sent the invitation. I did. I suppose I thought you might find it too difficult. You overestimate your importance in my life, Vanessa. Something flickered behind her eyes. She recovered quickly and turned to Alara. And who is your guest? I don't think we've met, Alara, she said quietly. Alara. Vanessa repeated the name as if tasting something she was not sure she liked. And what do you do, Alara? Vanessa. Ronan's voice did not rise, but it sharpened. Don't, I'm just making conversation. No, you're performing. Vanessa's smile thinned. She looked at Alara's jacket, Ronan's jacket, and then at her worn shoes, and then back at Ronan. I see you've developed new tastes. Alara looked up then. Her voice was calm and clear. And I see you've developed a habit of measuring people by what they're wearing instead of who they are. The table next to them went quiet. Vanessa's nostrils flared. You have no idea who you're speaking to. I do, Alara said. You're the woman who left a man at his lowest point and called it self-preservation. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Kieran appeared at her elbow, placing a possessive hand on her arm. Darling, the auction is about to start. But Vanessa was not finished. You walk into my event, dressed like that on his arm, and you think you can lecture me? Ronan stood slowly. The movement was unhurried, but it carried weight. She didn't walk in here to lecture you, Vanessa. I brought her because 10 minutes ago she was sitting on a sidewalk in the cold while 300 people in designer clothes walked past her, without a second glance on their way to a charity event. He paused. I thought the irony deserved a front row seat. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, turned sharply on her heel, and walked away with Kieran trailing behind her. Alara let out a breath she had been holding since the conversation began. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know. She's going to make your life difficult. Ronan looked at her with something close to a smile. She already did. I survived. The charity auction began, and for a while the room's attention shifted to the stage. But the whispers about Alara never fully stopped. It was during the second auction lot that an older gentleman approached their table. He moved slowly, leaning on a polished cane, and his white hair was combed neatly to one side. His name was Edmund Hargrove, and he was one of the few people in this world Ronan genuinely respected. Edmund had been a quiet giant in the financial world for decades. He sat on boards, advised governments, and mentored young executives with a patience that was rare among powerful men. He had also, many years ago, served as the personal attorney and financial guardian to one of the city's oldest families, the Sinclairs, before a fire destroyed their estate and took nearly everyone with it. Ronan, Edmund said warmly, extending a hand. I heard you were back on your feet. I should have called. You should have, Ronan said with genuine affection. But you're here now. Edmund smiled. Then his eyes moved to Alara, and the smile faded. Gestas had stared, with judgment or curiosity. Edmund stared the way a man stares when he sees a ghost. His gaze traveled across her face, the shape of her cheekbones, her dark eyes, the way her hair fell, and then slowly to the thin crescent-shaped scar beside her left eyebrow. His hand tightened on his cane. Ronan noticed immediately. Edmund, are you all right? The old man did not answer. He was looking at Alara as though the entire room had collapsed kaftas and she was the only thing still standing. Alara shifted uncomfortably. Is something wrong? Edmund's voice was barely a whisper. What is your name, Alara? His eyes widened. Alara what? Ronan stepped slightly closer to her, instinctively protective. Why does it matter? Edmund looked at Ronan, then back at her. His voice trembled. Please, I need to know. Alara looked between the two men. Something in the old man's expression frightened her, not because it was threatening, but because it was desperate, as if he was standing on the edge of a memory he had spent years trying to reach. Sinclair, she said quietly. My name is Alara Sinclair. Edmund's cane slipped. Ronan caught his arm. Sinclair, the old man repeated, and the word seemed to drain something from him. Do you know my family? Alara asked. Edmund's eyes filled with tears. Where did you grow up? Nowhere. Really, I was 7 when the fire happened. After that, I was moved from one foster home to another. Eventually, I aged out, and she stopped. The rest of the sentence was written on her face. Edmund pressed his hand to his mouth. The fire, he whispered. The Sinclair estate. Ronan turned sharply. What fire? 14 years ago, Edmund said, his voice breaking. The Sinclair estate in Connecticut burned to the ground. Catherine Sinclair, Alara's mother, died in the fire. The family's assets were frozen. And the daughter, he looked at Alara with the kind of pain that only comes from years of searching. The daughter was never found. Alara's hand gripped the edge of the table. We looked for you, Edmund said. For years, private investigators, legal teams. I personally funded search efforts across 3 states. But the foster system had buried your records under different names, different counties. You vanished. I didn't vanish, Alara said, her voice tight. I was just invisible. Edmund wiped his eyes with a trembling hand. Your mother was one of the finest people I ever knew. She had that same scar. He pointed gently toward her eyebrow. She got hers in a riding accident when she was 16. You got yours in the fire. If you are enjoying this story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Dark Secrets Live. Your support truly means the world and helps us bring you more incredible stories. Thank you. Now let's continue. Alara's lips trembled. How do you know that? Because I was the one who pulled you out. His voice was barely audible. I arrived too late to save your mother, but I found you in the garden. I carried you to the ambulance myself, and then the system took you and I lost you. Alara could not speak. She stared at the old man, and something inside her that had been locked for 14 years began to crack open. Your mother left a trust, Edmund continued, steadying himself, a substantial one. She established it the year you were born. It was meant to protect you, to ensure you would never want for anything. But when you disappeared, the funds could not be released. They've been held in a fiduciary account, untouched, waiting for the rightful heir to be found. How much? Ronan asked quietly. Edmund looked at him. Enough that she will never sit on a sidewalk again. The noise of the gala seemed to recede. Alara sat in her chair in her borrowed jacket and worn shoes, and the room that had judged her an hour ago now watched her in stunned silence. You were never forgotten, Edmund said softly. Your mother made sure of that. The trust was her final act of love. She knew the world could be cruel, and she wanted to build a wall between you and that cruelty. She just ran out of time. Alara looked at Ronan. Her eyes were full. You didn't know any of this, she said. No. Then why did you bring me in here? Ronan held her gaze. There was nothing rehearsed in his expression, no performance, no agenda. Just the raw face of a man who had acted on instinct and was only now beginning to understand why. Because you were sitting in the cold with more composure than anyone inside this building, and I thought that deserved to be seen. Alara covered her mouth with one hand, then the tears came. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that arrive when a person has been holding themselves together for so long that a single act of genuine kindness becomes the thing that finally undoes them. Ronan placed his hand on her back. Steady. Present. Not trying to fix anything, just letting her know she was not alone in the breaking. Across the room, Vanessa watched. Her silver dress caught the chandelier light, but something about her seemed dimmer now. She watched Ronan hold this woman with a tenderness she had never thought to value when it had been hers. An hour later, Ronan stepped outside and made a single phone call. He did not announce it or explain it to anyone. He spoke quietly to a woman who ran one of the most exclusive ateliers in Manhattan, someone who owed him several favors and was happy to collect on one at short notice. A stylist arrived within 40 minutes with a garment bag, a small case of jewelry, and a pair of heels in 3 sizes because Ronan had guessed inside the bag was a gown, deep emerald green, floor length with a fitted bodice and a flowing skirt that moved like water. The fabric was embroidered with thousands of tiny gold threads that caught light the way stars appear slowly as your eyes adjust to the dark. Alara stood in the suite upstairs looking at the dress on its hanger. I can't wear this. It's yours, Ronan said from the doorway, his back turned. Not borrowed. Yours. Why? Because tonight is about to change the rest of your life and you should feel like yourself when it does. The real you. Not the version this city tried to make you. The stylist helped her into the gown. When the zipper closed, when the fabric settled against her skin, when the gold threads caught the lamplight and scattered it softly across her collarbones, Elara looked into the mirror and went very still. The woman staring back at her had the same crescent scar beside her eyebrow, the same dark eyes, the same face she saw every morning in gas station bathrooms and shelter mirrors. But something was different. Not the dress, not the jewelry, something behind her eyes that had woken up. She touched the scar gently. Her mother had one in the same place. She had not allowed herself to think about that in years. "Is that me?" she whispered. Ronan's voice came from behind the door. "That's who you've always been." When the ballroom doors opened again, Elara walked through them wearing the emerald gown. The gold thread shimmered with each step, and the skirt swept behind her in a quiet, graceful trail. Her hair had been loosely styled, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She wore a single pair of gold earrings and nothing else. She did not rush. She did not pose. She simply walked into the room as though she had finally remembered that she belonged in it. The gala went silent, not because of the dress, though the dress was extraordinary, but because of the way she carried it. An hour ago, this woman had been mocked, whispered about, dismissed as an embarrassment, a stunt, a punchline someone would repeat over brunch tomorrow. And now she walked through the same room with a dignity so complete that it made every person who had whispered feel the full weight of what they had done. Ronan stood the moment he saw her. For a few seconds, he forgot everything. Vanessa, Kieran, the gala, the revenge that had brought him here. In the first place, all of it dissolved. There was only Elara, walking toward him with uncertain courage and quiet fire behind her eyes. He met her halfway across the floor. "You look beautiful," he said. Her eyes glistened. "This is too much." "No," he said, offering his arm. "For the first time tonight, they're seeing you as you actually are." Edmund Hargrove was invited to address the room. He had not planned a speech, but when the host offered him the microphone, the old man accepted it with the solemnity of someone who understood that certain moments were not optional. The room fell quiet. Edmund was not a man who wasted words, and everyone knew it. "I prepared nothing tonight," he began, "but life has asked me to say something that matters more than anything on the auction list." He turned toward Elara. 14 years ago, I knew a woman named Catherine Sinclair. She was generous in the way that costs something, brave in the way that doesn't announce itself. And she loved her daughter with the kind of ferocity that most people only talk about. Alara's hand found Ronan's beneath the table. During the fire that destroyed the Sinclair estate, Catherine did not survive. Her daughter, Kundert, a 7-year-old girl, was pulled from the wreckage and swallowed by a system that was supposed to protect her. His voice shook. "We searched for that child for 14 years. We hired investigators. We petitioned courts. We never stopped. The room was completely still. Tonight I looked across this ballroom and I saw Catherine's face again. The same eyes, the same courage, and the same scar beside her eyebrow, the one she got the night I carried her out of the fire." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Edmund looked around the room slowly, and when he spoke again, there was iron beneath the grief. "And I am ashamed. Because before you knew her name, before you knew her story, some of you looked at this woman and saw nothing worth respecting. You measured her by her clothes and found her lacking. You whispered about her while holding champagne glasses at a charity event. He let the silence do its work. Your mother would be proud of you, Elara, not because of any inheritance, but because you walked into a room that tried to erase you and you refused to disappear. To Elara Sinclair, not for what she is owed, but for what she never lost." For a moment, nothing moved. Then Ronan began to clap, slowly. One person joined, then another. Then the entire room was standing, and the sound filled the ballroom like something breaking open. Some people clapped because they were moved. Others clapped because they were ashamed and did not know what else to do with their hands. But Elara barely heard any of it. She felt only Ronan's hand around hers, steady and warm, the way a shore feels to someone who has been swimming for far too long. She turned to him. Tears ran down her face, catching the gold light from the chandeliers. "You saved me," she whispered. Ronan shook his head. "You were never lost. The world just wasn't looking hard enough." And then, in front of the room that had mocked her, in front of the woman who had abandoned him, and the man who had betrayed him, Ronan kissed Elara. It was not a kiss for the cameras. It was not a performance or a punishment. It was soft and unhurried, and full of something neither of them had expected to find that evening. The quiet, devastating recognition that they had been looking for each other without knowing it. The room disappeared. Vanessa stood 10 feet away in her silver dress, watching the man she had discarded hold another woman as though she were the most valuable thing in any room, in any city, in any life. Kieran whispered something to her about leaving, but Vanessa could not move. She was watching something she had once held in her hands and thrown away because she mistook its weight for burden. For the rest of the evening, Ronan did not leave Elara's side. He answered questions she was not ready for. He deflected the sudden swarm of people who now wanted to be seen near her. When a reporter approached with a recorder, Ronan stepped between them and said simply, "Not tonight." When the music began, he offered his hand. Elara hesitated. "Everyone will watch. They've been watching all night. At least now they'll see something worth looking at." She took his hand. They danced slowly beneath the chandeliers of the Beaumont Grand, surrounded by the same people who had sneered at her 2 hours earlier. Ronan held her carefully, not like a man showing off a prize, but like a man holding something the world had nearly broken, and that he had no intention of letting break again. Elara rested her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Any of this, neither do I," Ronan said. "We'll figure it out." Across the room, Vanessa picked up her clutch and walked toward the exit without saying goodbye to anyone. The silver dress swayed behind her, and for the first time that evening, no one turned to look. That night, Ronan brought Elara to his townhouse on the Upper East Side. She was still wearing the emerald gown, and the city lights caught the gold threads through the car window as they drove in silence. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she said quietly. "Will you tell me everything, the real version?" Ronan looked at her for a long time. Then he told her everything, the rise and the fall, and the specific particular pain of being abandoned by someone who promised to stay. He told her about the note Vanessa left, about the board meeting where his own people voted against him while avoiding his eyes, about the 3 months he spent in a rented apartment, rebuilding his empire from a laptop on a kitchen counter because his offices had been seized. And Elara told him about the fire, about waking up in a hospital with no one she recognized standing over her, about the foster homes, 7 in 4 years, and the way each one made her feel less like a child and more like a package being forwarded to the wrong address, about the years after she aged out, when the world offered her nothing and she learned to need nothing in return. They talked until the sky turned pale, and somewhere before dawn, Elara fell asleep on his shoulder, her hand still resting against his chest, and Ronan held very still because he understood that trust, when it comes from someone who has been given every reason not to trust, is the most fragile and valuable thing a person can offer. 6 months later, Ronan proposed in the garden of his Connecticut estate. There was no audience, no photographers, no revenge left between them. Just a man, a woman, and a question that had been answered long before it was asked. Their wedding was held in a small chapel surrounded by dogwood trees. Edmund walked Elara down the aisle because he had carried her out of the fire once, and he said it was only right that he carry her toward something beautiful. Years later, their home was full. 2 children with dark eyes and restless energy. A garden that Elara tended herself because she said growing things reminded her that patience was not the same as waiting. And a framed photograph on the mantle of a woman with a crescent scar beside her eyebrow, holding a newborn baby, looking at the camera, as though she already knew her daughter would need to be brave. Vanessa remarried twice. Kieran's company went under within a year. The gala continued annually, but nobody remembered it the way they remembered that night. And Elara, who had once sat on a cold sidewalk holding an empty cup, became proof of something the world often forgets. That dignity is not something given to you by a dress or a name or an inheritance. It is something you carry with you through the fire, through the cold, through every room that tries to tell you that you don't belong. And when the right person finally sees it, they don't rescue it. They simply refuse to look away.